Welcome back, everyone. We are jumping right into a really fascinating explainer today. We're unpacking a brilliant short story from rural Latin America called A Letter to God by G.L. Fuentes. It is this beautifully crafted narrative about unpredictable weather, completely unwavering faith, and honestly, a massive plot twist that you will absolutely not see coming.
I mean, think about it. What would you do if your entire livelihood was just wiped out overnight? Write a letter to God? It sounds kind of absurd, right? But put yourself in the shoes of a totally desperate farmer who makes this unbelievable choice in the face of absolute ruin. Okay, let's dive into this.
Starting off with Section 1, the devastating hailstorm. A farmer's hope turns to ruin. So our main character is an honest, hard-working farmer named Lencho, and he's basically been glued to the sky. Literally for weeks, he's just eagerly waiting for rain. And then, finally, for a few blissful hours, this gentle rain falls, bringing just immense happiness to Lencho and his family. But then, literally within minutes, the weather turns incredibly violent. A severe hailstorm just sweeps through and completely destroys his crops.
The entire harvest is ruined. Like, there isn't a single leaf left on the trees, not a single ear of corn in the field. And this leaves Lencho's family with absolutely zero food or money for the entire year. Try to imagine that level of absolute desperation for a second. The stakes are literally life and death now. But while everyone else around him is starting to lose hope in the face of real starvation, Lencho's mind goes somewhere else entirely.
Which brings us to Section 2, A Letter to God. An unshakable, unquestioning faith.
While everyone else is in total despair, Lencho has this absolute rock-solid belief that God sees everything. So he decides to actually take action. He writes a letter. So, the crucial point is, he doesn't just ask for some vague, mystical miracle. He asks for exactly 100 pesos. That's his precise calculation for the bare minimum needed to feed his family, survive the year, and buy new seeds to sow his fields all over again. Let's just walk through his incredibly simple, direct actions here. Step 1, he literally sits down and writes a letter addressed simply to God. Step 2, he clearly asks for exactly 100 pesos. And Step 3, he just heads right into town and drops it into the mail slot at the local post office. It perfectly sets up this wild, almost surreal scenario, right? A letter directly addressed to the divine, just sitting there in a rural postal bin.
Moving right along to Section 3, the secret intervention, a conspiracy of kindness. So what exactly happens to a letter addressed to God? Well, it gets picked up by a very confused mailman who immediately takes it to his boss, the local postmaster. And the postmaster is just deeply, deeply moved by Lencho's absolute unwavering faith. He's totally determined to keep that hope alive. He really doesn't want Lencho's faith to be shattered. So he comes up with a plan. He collects money from his office colleagues, and he even chips in the significant portion of his own personal money. Think about that. These people are pooling their own hard-earned cash just to save a total stranger.
But, there's a catch. Even with all their incredible kindness and collective effort, they do fall a bit short. The employees could only scrape together 70 pesos, so they're 30 pesos short of Lencho's 100 peso plea. Still, it's a lot of money. They put the cash into an envelope, really hoping it's going to be enough to sustain him.
And how do you think they sign it? Just one single word, God. And this brilliantly illustrates their selfless desire to just remain completely anonymous. They aren't looking for a pat on the back or a reward, they just want to preserve the miracle for Lencho. They want his faith to remain fully, 100% intact.
Which brings us to the absolute climax of our explainer here. Section 4, an ironic twist. The dramatic climax.
So it's Sunday morning, and Lencho comes into town to check for his mail. The postmaster is practically brimming with the joy of doing a good deed, and he secretly watches as the letter is handed over to the farmer. The suspense here is literally intense. Now, Lencho is not surprised that God answered. Seriously, not even the slightest hint of surprise shows on his face. That is just how absolute his faith is. But as he actually starts counting the money, his expression totally changes. He becomes furious. He realizes there are only 70 pesos in there, and well, he knows for a fact that God doesn't make math mistakes.
So what does he do? He marches right back up to the post office window, asks for paper, and writes a second letter to God. He tells God to send the rest of the money, but he adds, and guys, this is the massive punchline of the whole story. He says, don't send it through the mail because the post office employees are a bunch of crooks. I mean, no way, right? He actually assumes the very people who sacrificed their own hard-earned money to help him were the ones who stole the missing 30 pesos.
It is just such a gut punch of an ending. So let's pivot slightly and look at Section 5, Faith and Human Nature,
unpacking the dramatic irony.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how it gives us the actual vocabulary for what we just experienced. To really appreciate why this ending lands with such a massive punch, we have to look at a literary concept called dramatic irony. Basically, dramatic irony happens when we, the readers, know something that the characters in the story do not. We know for a fact the post office employees honestly collected the money to help him out of the goodness of their hearts. But Lencho? He mistakenly believes they stole it. That massive disconnect between what we know and what Lencho believes is exactly what makes this story so uniquely powerful. This contrast perfectly captures the real duality of Lencho's character. On one hand, we see his absolute faith in God. It's this beautiful, pure faith that gives him the immense strength to survive a totally devastating crisis. But on the other hand, we see the dark side of that simplicity, right? A totally naive, cynical, and really unfair judgment of ordinary people. His completely unquestioning faith in the divine tragically blinded him to the very real human kindness sitting quite literally right in front of him.
Let's move to and see how this builds into our core takeaways. Ultimately, G.L. Fuentes is showing us that yes, absolutely, faith provides immense strength in incredibly difficult times. But human nature is super complex and really often misunderstood. Unfair judgments can so easily destroy the beauty of hidden generosity. The overarching moral here is that we really must appreciate the kindness of others and try to never jump to cynical conclusions without all the facts.
Well, we've reached the end of our explainer, and I want to leave you all with a final thought to chew on. How often do we miss the hidden kindness of others just because we're expecting our miracles to look a certain specific way? Lencho absolutely got his miracle, but his rigid expectations totally blinded him to the actual human beings who delivered it. Definitely keep that in mind the next time something doesn't go exactly as you planned. Thank you so much for joining me to explore this truly incredible story today. I'll catch you in the next explainer.